Bharat sir, thank you so much for talking to me. It's always a privilege to speak with you. And I must say before we begin that you literally wrote India's nuclear doctrine. You were in the drafting committee, and you are the one person who has had the most impact on my own thinking. Even though it's very nascent, and even though I am basically intellectually a child in front of you, there is no one has influenced my thinking with regards to geopolitics more than you. Your book is literally the Bible, and I've seen the top generals of the country, when I've spoken to them about you, have told me in as many words that they keep your book at their bedside. They said that to me. And so with that context, I want to pick your mind on what's going on. And of course, I've read your blog too, what you wrote about the catalytic war. We'll come to that, sir. But the elephant in the room is the nuclear question with Iran, which is the rationale for the whole thing. We've been hearing it since the beginning that they could build a bomb within a week. What goes into, sir, that stage? Does it culminate easily? Does it not? Is it fact? Is it fiction? What is it that you can educate us about, sir?
Well, look, I think the Americans have flogged this particular reason for their attack as they had done earlier. And then Trump announced that they had obliterated his word, the Iranian capability, which is, of course, nonsense then. It's nonsense now because they haven't heard the real facilities, the centrifuges that are under the Fordow mountain. It's unreachable. They obviously failed. So whatever other things they destroyed superficially on the surface, and maybe they penetrated some, but this is very deep inside the mountains in Fordow, and they haven't gotten to it. But that said, the Iranians haven't progressed beyond the 60% level, 62%, 64% or thereabouts. So it's well short of the weapon grade, which is 92 or 93% level enrichment of uranium for it to be a fissile material that is good for a bomb or an explosive device. So in that sense, then the Iranians are not where they had hoped they would be in terms of acquiring a weapon, an actual weapon. So whether or not they have a design, they do not have the fissile material for the design to work, for the bomb to work. So that capability is still there. And the Americans haven't destroyed it. The Israelis haven't destroyed it. They have tried a lot, but they haven't been able to get to it. So in that sense, then, the latency of the Iranian capability is still very much there. That hasn't been affected. So it's a latent weapon capability, latent weapons threshold that the Iranians still have and possess. That said, if you ask me, can a 60% level enriched uranium be used in any way as a weapon? Yes, it can. As I've written elsewhere, it's a radiation diffusion device. You can literally wrap an explosive around it, plastic explosive, and blow it up. You'll have radioactivity, and that's what a radiation diffusion device is. It'll diffuse radioactivity. It's an awful way of killing people, but that's what is possible. If you ask me theoretically what a 60% level enriched uranium can do by way of hurting people or being a weapon, it's not the kind of deliverable weapon we are talking about. It's a weapon that will have to be literally carried somewhere into a city and then blown up or something like that, because you're not sure how the thing is going to work if you're going to deliver it with a ballistic missile. You might still get radioactivity, actually. You would get radioactivity. But then that would be, very devastating kind of effect. So you can still have it.
Do you want to know who you really are? आप कुछ चीज़ों में एक्सेल क्यों करते हो? आप कुछ चीज़ों में एक्सेल क्यों नहीं कर पाते? These things are unlocked when you understand personality. साइकोमेट्रिक साइकोलॉजी बहुत एडवांस हो चुकी है. दुनिया का सबसे एडवांस, सबसे वेल रिसर्च पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट है बिग 5. ये कैसे अफेक्ट करते हैं आपके करियर चॉइसेस को, आपके रिलेशनशिप्स को, आपके वेल्थ ओरिएंटेड डिसीजंस को, एंड एवरीथिंग for free. We have decided to distribute this. We have created the test. The tool is there. The link is in the description. Please go ahead, use it, spread the awareness, become more self-aware. Thank you and all the best.
But that's not what I think where the Iranians are at. But if they're absolutely desperate and so on, who knows how they can use it? All I'm saying is theoretically what is possible in terms
I
of,
understand.
yeah, of that kind of capability that they say they have.
And what you described just now, sir, with the plastic explosive wrapping the radioactive fissile material around it is basically a dirty bomb,
It's
is what
basically
they
a
call it.
radiation. It's called a radiation diffusion device. It's really
Hmm.
a bomb. It's called a dirty bomb. I mean, it'll
Hmm.
just spread radioactivity all over the place. And radioactivity is the worst kind of killer. In
Hmm.
generations, it degrades the human. All kinds of the genome is affected in a very real way. That's what happened to the Japanese. The only time an atomic bomb was used, you had generational effects because it affects the genetic structures and so on. So that's very devastating. So that's a long term effect you have.
Uh,
And radiation also, if you explode it in a very densely populated environment, there will be some sort of a explosion. But again, depending on how it is packaged and how it is exploded, you might have some thermal effect, but basically it is radioactive activity.
radioactive. So that gives us some perspective about the Iranian side, but the American side does have them. What sort of contingencies do you foresee or do you think might occur for them to use one? Because they are the only country that has precedence of actually doing so on a civilian population.
But
What do
if
you think they could be desperate enough to do this?
yeah, it's not the Americans. The Americans don't give a damn for Israel or anybody else, and Trump certainly doesn't. So he will not do anything by way of using a tactical nuke or a small yield weapon against Iran or something like that. But Israel might. I mean, they have a whole panoply of weapons, fission weapons. They may use it. Because then their people are affected, and it's a very small country with a small population. So even if you say if in a very dense part of Jerusalem, which is also partly Arab, which they will not do, or Muslim and Christian, but let's say Tel Aviv or something like that, then it's purely more Jewish people who are going to be affected. That's going to be, I don't think it's going to go unanswered. There will be a response, and that response could very well be a tactical news weapon by the Israelis, and they have all the means of delivery. They have all the means of, you know, inflicting an awful lot of damage uh, on the Iranians.
And so, should that
But I
happen?
don't see that happening. I don't. Let me again say very quickly, the nuclear taboo has held because of a reason. Because nobody knows what will happen once there's the first breach of that taboo. Once the taboo is breached, we don't know what will happen. That's the reason why, for instance, despite all the Pakistanis jumping up and down and saying, if you hit the Punjab heartland in West Punjab, we are going to go nuclear. What happened? Nothing happened when we hit Bahawalpur and Muridke, which is what I've been saying all along. Uh, from when in my 2002 book, Nuclear Weapons, Indian Security, I've been saying with Pakistan is in no position to respond because we have a raison d'etat, a raison d'etre for using a nuclear, for hitting the terrorist targets in Muridke. They couldn't do anything about it, even though they had announced, General Kidwai had announced that West Pakistan heartland, it's, if you hit it, well, be prepared for a strike back. Nothing happened. As I'd said all along, it wouldn't happen. Why? Quite apart from anything else, they had given us a reason to do that. Fine. The other reason is the sheer exchange ratio. What is an exchange ratio? Exchange ratio in a nuclear war, any kind of conflict, is a destruction you can impose on the enemy vis-a-vis the destruction you can absorb. That's called the exchange ratio. If the exchange ratio is adverse, for Pakistan, it's very, very adverse. So I've always said for Pakistan, it's a showpiece thing. They try to build it up and we'll do that. But if it comes to it, they'll not be able to ever use it for no matter what the provocation. by India, simply because the exchange ratio is so adverse. All of Pakistan will be finished. Quite literally, it'll the Pakistani society and country will become extinct as a social organism in the Oswald Spenglerian sense of a country. A country is what? A society that is live, that people and so on. It'll be gone. There will be some people who will survive and so on. But in exchange for what? India will suffer two major cities lost. We will lose two cities. That is the exchange ratio. So, let's say Delhi and Bombay. Well, okay, but then that's the exchange that the Pakistan Army generals have to consider. And this has been gamed all over the world. It's not just we have gamed it here in the National Security Council and so on. So everybody knows, Pakistanis know what is going to happen if they, by any chance, blunder into a first use. No matter what the provocation, Indian armored columns going into, across Rahimi Yar Khan, whatever happens, the end result is going to be the same. End of Pakistan. Pakistan becomes extinct. Pakistan army is a professional army. They're not idiots. I keep saying, either you have to assume that someone is idiotic enough to go in despite an adverse ratio, exchange ratio, despite everything against you. You say, oh, we are going to do no for Allah or something like that. Well, okay, then be prepared. And the greatest beneficiary of the Pakistani state is the Pakistan army. No, not the politicians, not the landlords in Punjab, not all these people. It is the army. They have a whole bunch of industries that they run, whole bunch of commercial enterprises they run, the Fauji Foundation, the Shaheen Foundation, and so on. So they have absolute every reason for never ever to cross the nuclear threshold, the Rubicon, ever in used terms. You can threaten all you want, you can jump up and down, but that's it. That's all they'll be able to do. It's what I always said, and it was proved by Sindoor. So, you have to know the psychology of a taboo, a nuclear taboo, and what the effects are, in real terms, realistic terms. And for Pakistan, it is quite really existential. So they'll not use it. But in terms of Israel, it's even worse. Israel is so much smaller. And therefore, they'll respond extremely vehemently and destroy Iran, which they can do. There'll be no exchange ratio in return. I mean, sure, the radioactivity of a dirty bomb is going to hurt them very badly. That's a provocation. In which case, then Iran is going to be wiped out. So, the again, it doesn't work for Iran to do anything like this. You see?
So, but
Everybody, they are
if I
professionals and rational people on both sides.
yes.
However, religiously, motivated and whatever the rhetoric that emanates out of Qom or from, these Lashkar types in Pakistan, so on, it doesn't really work that way. And Pakistan
So,
Army is extremely professional.
sir, what you said about Pakistan, I want to ask if that can be transposed to the case with Iran and Israel because of three reasons. Sir, I have three reasons which I'm not very clear about. Number one, the assumption that there are people who are rational, where we have seen that there is ideology at work here, and as such, the leader of their religious order has been killed. So the assumption of rationality might or might not hold. That's one. The other is the ladder of escalation continues to be rewritten. Every time Iran does something that has not been done before, for instance, now attacking places like Dubai, which they are doing with impunity. And the third is the logic of preemptive action. Does that not qualify as enough reason for this something to be more likely?
No, no. First of all, you're quite right in saying the Shiite Islamic theology is very much, built on self-sacrifice at the Karbala syndrome. The very fact that Ali Hussein, Hussein Ali, the son-in-law of the Prophet and so on, sacrificed himself in Karbala, which is not very far from it's in Iraq actually. Karbala is in Iraq, but that's the Shiite theology that works in Iran's interest in terms of motivating people who will do it. But these are not the people who actually are going to handle the weapon. If you give it to them, sure, they'll say, we are going to die anyway, we are going to blow everybody else up. No, but these are not the people who are going to do it. The more rational people are the people like the Deputy Foreign Minister who was here in Delhi for the Raisina dialogue or whatever it is called. And you've seen the papers today. They have talked rationally, and so these are rational people. I mean, these are not people who are just going to go off the edge into doing some damn fool things. So no, that's not going to happen. The Karbala syndrome, absolutely true, but the exchange issue, as I said, is so devastatingly certain and definite. If Iranians had a weapons arsenal, then it's a different thing. It's a different thing. It's very different than saying, okay, we're going to use a radiation device, because there are all kinds of counters to radioactivity, like iodine and so on and so forth. If you give the thing, your body becomes more immune to radioactivity, etc. Then there are shelters, gamma ray shelters, and so on and so forth. These are things that are there in some parts. I suppose we also have it for our top apex leadership and so on. We have protection of that kind in case of there's a nuclear attack and so on. But that's not going to happen, as I said, for the simple reason that the Iranians do not have an equal amount of the assets, the nuclear assets, to threaten Israel. What they have is a dirty bomb. It's not the same thing as a proven weapon that's coming, that's going to devastate all of Iran. All of economic activity of Iran will be gone. All of Iran will be finished. Two 20 kiloton weapons will pretty much completely devastate all of Tehran, metropolitan Tehran, around the Zagros mountains and so on and so forth. The whole thing will be gone. So it's precisely what will happen to Pakistan, except that they have a threshold and they still can't cross it. Can you imagine how much harder it will be for Iran, for people who are minding actually the Iran, not the Pasdaran, the Revolutionary Guard Corps. They are not handling the nuclear weapon. They don't have any kind of a handle on it. It's the scientific community and the political community who are much more. I've been to Iran several times. I've gone to the nuclear facilities. I've seen some of the stuff. So I know whereof I speak, because when I speak to them, they're extremely rational. As are the Pakistanis I've dealt with, extremely rational. They understand what the whole game is, and they're not going to blunder into something that's going to end up finishing them off completely, like an annihilation. That's not going to happen.
Sir, I want to now address the other elephant in the room, which is World War III, which, in your own words, you say is a word so pregnant that it should not be bandied about.
No, absolutely nonsense. As I've said if you read my last post, it's a catalytic war. Basically, they had hoped to start a catalytic war, except most of the countries they have hit in the region, all the Emirates and Sheikhdams and Kuwait and all these things, they haven't responded in kind. It's the Americans who are doing the hitting. So if had they all responded in kind, Jordan, for instance, where most of the bases are being used by the Americans and so on, you would have a catalytic war. But there's no catalytic war, because only two people keep hitting, and these people try to extend the war, and they're unable to, because these guys don't respond, because they know that they don't want to get into it. As I argued, they won't. There's a reason I said there's going to be no catalytic war. So, and that is not been. So again, I was quite right in saying there would not be a catalytic war, even though Iran is offering every provocation to every other country except the US and the Israelis, who are the main protagonists in this conflict. So against Iran. So if these countries have not responded to date, they're going to respond in the future, because they have no incentive to. They've already gotten hurt. They are still being protected by the American air defense systems, and to an extent the Israeli air defense systems that some of these countries have bought into. So what they have suffered, but they do not want their thing, because if they hit Tehran, if they engaged intimately, they involved themselves in decimating Iran, in hurting Qom and the Shia main thing, then they have a problem on their hands. As again I've argued, the Shia community within their societies In Bahrain, it's almost the majority. What do you think is going to happen? And Bahrain is where the Fifth Fleet is based. The U.S. Fifth Fleet and the entire, support elements all based in Bahrain, where the majority, just look up, they're all majority Shia. But therefore, the ruler has been very, very oppressive in keeping down the Shia majority. He survives on American assistance and military support. So, again, there's no incentive for anything to happen. Because the Shia thing, everybody's very afraid, all the Arab countries. What will happen if we activate our own Shia community if we react in some way, which is then interpreted by some mullahs as saying, oh, they're hurting. Then the Karbala thing comes in, oh, what the heck, we're going to die, we're going to take everybody down. Okay, then that's what the emirs and the sheikhs and all these guys are very worried about. They're not about the Americans and the Israelis hitting them. They're not involved other than say, okay, fine, it's a force majeure situation. We can't do anything. We cannot keep you from using our bases, which they can't. Force majeure is not quite right in the literal sense, but it is actually force majeure. A major force is coming and saying, well, we are going to use your bases. Okay, so what are you going to do? Right? So this is the situation.
Sir, I want to now talk about what
Last
you
question.
ref.
I have to go. Okay,
Sure,
because I really have to get back to work. So
absolutely, sir.
yeah.
Sir, this will be the last question. Where, if in your blog, you have referred to the dog that did not bark, wherein you were referring to Russia and China being very silent. You connected that to the possibility of them supplying supersonic anti-ship missiles and Iran possibly hitting and sinking an aircraft carrier like the USS Gerald Ford or the Abraham Lincoln, and what eventualities do follow if that happens.
Well, look, if the Trump then goes down, when Trump is going down, he's a bit of a fairly unhinged kind of person. You can see that he's fairly unhinged. He's very impulsive. He does all kinds of things. And because he has the power to do it, the system allows it, which is very strange. You'd have thought that the greatest democracy in the world would have the countervailing kind of systemic constraints on people from acting up, as say the executive head is doing. But apparently there is not, because he has a majority in the legislature. There's other thing, there's that, and he's being allowed to do whatever he wants. He's literally like some mad king of Bavaria, Ludwig of Bavaria, who was supposedly mad, did all kinds of weird things. So he's doing it, and that's called the neo-royalist kind of strain in American politics, as some political scientists and commentators have said in America. So that strain is very much there. So you have this. Nothing prevents him, but if, say, his career is finished if he goes down, I mean, he's going to be impeached. Something is going to happen. It's over for Trump if a career goes down. If USS Abraham Lincoln or USS Gerald Ford goes down, and Gerald Ford is the most modern and everything with all escort flotillas and whatnot, all kinds of defensive systems to protect it. But if despite all that, the anti-ship missiles go through, supersonic missiles, and they cannot be stopped, honestly, then the question is whether they had it or they're not activating it. I don't know, why they're not using it. I mean, how much more provocation can the Pasdaran or the Iranian military have from these guys? Because they've already done the worst they can. They're pretty much, taken out most of their ballistic missile capability, the drone capabilities, and so on and so forth, and the Navy. So, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen. But again, I don't think I've said all bets are off as the carrier sinks only because Trump is there. But otherwise, it's not provocation enough. A boat of yours sinks 4,000 miles from home shores. So what, yeah? In real terms, okay, tragedy, but okay, and we'll respond, come back and hit you hard. But nuclear weapons? I don't think so. So even though I've said all bets are off, it's not bets are off unless the Russians and Chinese come in and which they won't. And the Chinese, if they haven't come in so far, they're not going to come in. But what they're doing is they're providing, as is now known, strategic intelligence for the guided missiles that are left the guided munitions that are left for drones and so on, long-range drones. And they're having an effect. What's not reported is how much the Americans have suffered, actually. The military has been hit. I mean, you can have Hegseth and all these guys jumping up and down and claiming, we have wiped them out. Okay, fine, but you've been very badly hurt. I think they're under reporting the effects in terms of the kills, the Americans that are killed, about the installations and the infrastructure that has been destroyed. And this is I'm given to understand, I don't know, I may be wrong, is the Fifth Fleet base is pretty badly hurt. And that's the reason why they're now going to Ukraine to say, please give us the technology to help us to counter the Iranian drones. Because the Iranian drones were sent to Russia, which the Ukrainians managed to counter with something they could have that they call the Octopus anti-drone system, and so on and so forth. So the Americans are now looking to the Ukrainians for help in dealing with Iranian missiles that were given to Russia. See how the complication here that's going to be. So all the countries get drawn in. This is why there's the possibility. This is what makes for a world war, catalytic war, in normal historical term, but not here. Because no one's responding. From within the region, no one's responding. When no one's responding, then how is it? What can the Iranians do?
I'm going to sort of link your blog, the last one, with this conversation for everybody who wants a broader context. From my side, I could not be more thankful for your time and for your generous perspective. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.